Welcome to the off-campus housing lunch and learn session, sponsored by the Cal Poly Parent Advisory Council and hosted by Parent and Family Programs. Lunch and learn webinars are a resource for Cal Poly parents and supporters featuring campus and community experts. So again, welcome. My name is Kanani Makikau. I am the Assistant Director for Parent and Family Programs, and I will be your host today. Also joining me is Lead Coordinator Stanley Learn. The Parent Advisory Council Chair is also here, Susan Wise, and Vice Chair Mark Ampiros is also here. Really excited to have those folks with me today. Some housekeeping items first. The Q&A function is enabled, and you can find that button located at the bottom of your screen. You're encouraged to type questions during the presentation, which we will get to after the presentation is over, okay? So if you have a question, just put it there and we'll try and get to it after the presentation is over. Additionally, this webinar will be recorded. You probably saw that notification already. And we're going to put this, when we record the webinar, we're going to put that on the Parent and Family Programs website so that it will live there. And you can revisit it if you need to. I recommend taking a look at the many resource webinars that we already have posted that we've done in the past, because there is a lot of helpful information in there. And so today, the Parent and Family Programs team is excited to have our valued colleague and off-campus housing coordinator, Sarah Bacio, as our guest presenter. With a decade of dedicated service within higher education, Sarah is passionate about student support and development. Sarah has developed mentoring programs, transfer support programs, and served as an academic and career advisor. Currently, Sarah is the off-campus housing coordinator at Cal Poly and works to ensure students have a seamless transition to independent living in San Luis Obispo. So Sarah, welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I'm going to go ahead and queue up our presentation. So my name is Sarah Bacio. I use pronouns she, her, and I am the off-campus housing coordinator here at Cal Poly. And so today I'm going to go through our off-campus housing presentation to give you some insight into our local rental market, give you some tips, and also provide you with resources for you and for your students. So I would like to go ahead and start with a land acknowledgement. So Cal Poly sits on the traditional lands of the Titu Yaktilhini Northern Chumash tribe of San Luis Obispo County and region. The Titu Yaktilhini have a documented presence in this area for over 10,000 years. The Tilhini peoples have stewarded their ancestral and unceded homelands, which include all of the cities, communities, federal and state open spaces within the San Luis Obispo County region. And these homelands extend east into the Carrizo Plains towards Kern County, south to the Santa Maria River, north to Ragged Point, and west beyond the ocean shoreline in an unbroken chain of lineage, kinship, and culture. So we are forever indebted to these peoples. Okay, so we are going to jump in and really first start talking about how on-campus living is different than off-campus living. So I'm going to make an assumption that most of your students do currently live on campus. And so for the folks that don't live on campus and they're already off campus, I also have resources we'll be chatting with, but that'll be a little bit later in the presentation. So starting right now and thinking about those differences for on-campus versus off-campus. When your student is on campus, that rent is included in the student center bill. It's not something that you think about necessarily month to month. And your utilities are all included in that cost of rent. So your internet, water, sewer, electricity, all of that is included. It's not additional costs that you have to think about month to month. There's free laundry facilities near or at the unit. They come with fully furnished apartments, which is really great. You just have to think about coming with your decorations and what your student needs to feel like that is their new home and feel comfortable. But you don't have to worry about providing a bed or a desk or anything like that. And one of the main ones is that you have access to, your student has access to CSDs, RAs, university housing maintenance, and custodial services 24/7. So you know if an issue arises, they can submit that report and they can get that immediate help. And being able to have that security there with CSDs and RAs available, as well as the close proximity to classes and campus events. So knowing how important it is for students to get involved on campus, to feel connected, to have that easy walk to get to their classes. When you're on campus, it is much easier to be able to just kind of roll out of bed and head to your classes, as opposed to if you're thinking about commuting. But when we're off campus, we see a lot of these differences pop up. So your rent is going to be due monthly, and it's going to be a higher upfront deposit cost. And so that can sometimes be a little bit jarring for students as they're starting to think about budgeting and starting to have to think about where their money is going to be going month to month, as opposed to in this lump sum quarter to quarter. Utility costs are going to vary by our properties locally. So you'll see that some of the properties that you look at, they'll have most, but not all, utilities included, and some may only have the simple trash included, and the tenants are responsible for the majority of the other utilities. Furnishings are also going to vary by property, and what we see locally is the apartment complexes, mostly, that are fully furnished. We're going to see higher rent at those places because they are providing more to you in terms of amenities. And so finding a place that's unfurnished might be that way to save just a little bit on money for this new transition for your student. And when we talked about having 24/7 access to custodial and maintenance services, that really does vary by the property. And a lot of times, if we're thinking about an individual landlord that they have, and they are, have this second home that they're using as additional income, they are going to outsource their plumbing issues or maintenance issues to a company and not necessarily come over and do that work themselves. So there is a lag time between having those maintenance requests fixed, and it will vary from when you're on campus, where it's going to happen within a day or two. It could take more than that when you're off campus. So really encouraging your students that if they see a small leak, if they notice the toilet's flushing a little bit slower, that they report that right away to their landlord or property manager, just to make sure that small issue does not turn into a big issue. And down the line, making sure that, they're able to get their full security deposit back. There may be parking challenges when you're off campus. That could potentially be at the unit or when they arrive to campus. And this isn't unique to Cal Poly. This isn't unique to many places within the state that we have parking challenges. And so just keeping that in mind when you're thinking about what you're searching for and what your needs are, being able to kind of factor that location in, and how are you going to be commuting? Because you may have longer commuting times in addition to those parking challenges. So I do have another slide kind of talking about that a little bit more, but really thinking about, is your student willing or interested in walking or biking or potentially even carpooling with another student to alleviate some of those concerns, and then also just factoring in that time. So I did want to share a little bit about our local rental market and things to know. The first is there are on average 13 prospective renters per vacant apartment. And this information is coming from San Luis Obispo City. They had put out a report, I believe it was just this last summer, on some of the research that they had done. And so when we talk about the slow rental market, we do talk about it being very competitive. There are a lot of students who are moving from on campus to off campus. We have new incoming transfer students, and then we also have other residents who are also looking for rentals, moving around, other folks coming to this area. So when we're thinking about that competitiveness, there are on average 13 prospective renters per vacant apartment. And so that's why it's great that you all are here right now. I've probably talked with many of your students as well. I've been giving presentations all last quarter and already started giving presentations to students this quarter, and really starting that search process early. Approximately half of renters also choose to renew their lease. which also leads to that competitive piece of the rental market. We see a high demand and a lot of times low inventory. And so this could be your student, though, for this next year that they sign a lease, they really like the location, their roommate situation is working out really great, and they decide to renew their lease and have that stability of staying in that one spot for the rest of their time at Cal Poly. And also, SLO has many historical homes. So we're thinking about homes that could be 100 years old that your student might be moving into. And that's going to always come with different sets of challenges as opposed to some of these brand new built apartment complexes. And so really being able to understand that you might see a whole range of properties as your student is going out and searching. And we have some helpful resources on the website about what to look for when you're touring a rental, what to ask when you're touring a rental, to help your student make sure that the place that they are renting is going to be the best fit for them. And then one thing I like to really hit on, especially when I'm talking with your students, is that they are entering a new and different community than their on-campus living community. So when they're on campus, they're surrounded by other students and potentially a lot of like-minded majors and that sort of thing. But when they move off campus, that really changes. And they are still going to be surrounded by students because we have so many students that live locally, but they're going to be surrounded also by young families, potentially retired folks, potentially their faculty and staff that they work with daily as well. And so really recognizing just that their community changes and things that maybe are a little bit easier to manage when you're on campus. If you get a little bit loud, your RA knocks on the door and says, hey, let's quiet it down. That may have different impacts when they move off campus. Okay, so talking a little bit more, I alluded to this, but the importance of starting early. So again, you all are in the right spot hearing this information right now. Many of your students have heard this over the last quarter. Really starting the search early because we are in the thick of the rental cycle right now. These leases are getting signed in winter quarter. Some have already been signed as early as late fall quarter, but that was very few. We're going to also see some leases really pop up in spring quarter, but as we move through the academic year, we're going to see less and less availability in rentals. And so we want students to start searching early, so that way they have everything set for that late summer move-in date. And also just to let you know a little bit of the rental market. So what you might be looking at is going to be single family homes. We do have quite a few of those. Like I mentioned, a landlord has it as a second income. We have a lot of property managers locally. There are a lot of apartment complexes that are also very close to campus. We have condos, there's subleasing available. And then also a lot of students are rooming with seniors who are going to be graduating, but they're not graduating just yet. So they have rooms opened in those houses. And so there's lots of different ways to be able to access these different types of available rentals. And we'll go through that. Rent prices can vary from $2,400 to $4,000 a month. I know that can seem like a lot, and it is. It is, again, not unique to SLO County. We're seeing this across the state for sure within California. And so that budgeting piece is really important. Starting early is another piece that's really important because being able to find the rentals that are going to be a little bit more budget friendly, because those get swooped up pretty quickly. And so starting early is always going to be in your best bet. There are individual leases versus shared leases, and that'll depend on the property and kind of how you utilize those. If you have any of those specific questions, you can always let me know. And I really encourage you to have your students reach out early and follow up with their landlord or potential landlord or property manager. So really kind of treating it almost like a job interview when they're going to those viewings, because most all places will require you to view the property before you can kind of move forward in the application process. So introducing themselves, letting the landlord or property manager know a little bit about them and their roommates, and then having that follow-up and completing that application. Okay, So a couple things to consider before you start renting. This is going to be where many of you are probably at right now. Some of you have maybe already figured this out, but you want to think about your budget. I do have a helpful budgeting resource available on the website. And so that budgeting resource was put together by myself, financial aid, and also our basic needs office. And so it really highlights what you're looking at as one-time costs versus your quarterly costs versus your monthly costs. And I'm sure there's more that could be added to that, but it is a Word document, so you're able to edit as needed for your student. Also considering location. So I did briefly touch on this when we're thinking about commuting. So if your student does not have access to a car, living a little bit further away within San Luis Obispo or even in the surrounding town might not be totally feasible. So really thinking about what's going to be feasible in terms of commuting. Lots of students bike, have their scooters, walk. It's great ways to be able to get to campus. Also save on the cost of not having to buy that parking pass for on campus. Also consider amenities. So what's important to your student? Is it important that they have a fully furnished apartment so they don't have to worry about bringing things from home or heading to the thrift shop or buying new furniture? We also have a lot of opportunities locally in terms of thrift stores and that sort of thing as a cost-saving measure. But also too, there's a lot of places that have pools or gyms or indoor storage for bikes and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of different amenities to consider. And then lease terms are going to be really important. So most of the leases are going to start roughly in the July to August timeframe, and then end in the June timeframe. June to July, depending. And so making sure that when you're reviewing those leases, that the lease dates are going to make sense for you. And also understanding what is allowed or not allowed in terms of subleasing. So that's a question I get a lot from folks is they have a lease that starts in July, but their student isn't going to be here in SLO in July. They're going to be back home or they're going to be studying or vacationing or anything like that. And so sometimes your lease will allow you to sublease right away, and you could sublease for those 2 months before school starts. But if not, some leases actually require you to first be an established renter and then be allowed to sublease after the fact. So it's just really important that what your needs are, that you're reviewing that lease, and that's going to make sense for you. And most rentals do require a cosigner as a part of the application process. So whether that's you or whether that's a different family member or a family friend, I encourage you to help your student get that person set up right now as you're in this preparation cycle, because if an application is incomplete, we talk about how competitive the rental market is, that application is just going to go to the bottom of the pile, as opposed to having it fully complete and giving your student the best chances possible. So I do really encourage you to help your students set that person up, get all the necessary information, so it's just ready to go when those applications start being sent out. And then encourage your student to find compatible roommates. I unfortunately hear a lot that maybe it wasn't the best roommate situation to move off campus with a particular person. And it's a little bit harder to be able to get out of that situation as opposed to when you're living on campus. And you might be able to work with your CSD to move to a new location on campus. So I'm going to talk in a minute about a workshop that we do that will help your student with that. So I would encourage them to attend that. And then we have a lot of resources on our website, and I'm going to go through all of those as well. So that'll be a great starting point for everybody if you haven't already utilized it. And then just a quick note on renter's insurance, knowing that it's not something you ever want to have to use, but it is really great when you have it and you need it. Many places will require that you do actually have renter's insurance. So I want to encourage you to also start that process. Potentially it's adding your student onto your current insurance. Many car insurances also have a renter's insurance for a low cost to be able to add on. So really just kind of shopping around and figuring out what is best for you, what policy is best for you and your student, and then also making sure that it meets the requirements set forth by your landlord or property manager. All right, so I did want to share just a little bit about what I do for your students. And if I can encourage or ask of you to encourage your student to attend, these are really great workshops that we go through to be able to cover everything about the search process. I'm giving you all a very high level, kind of some quick tips and tricks, but I go into a lot more detail with your students, and that way they can feel really comfortable, they can feel educated and empowered to be able to go out into the rental market. And so this first one is the off-campus housing, or the off-campus adventure begins, unlocking your housing path. And so we will talk about the search process. We'll talk about how to avoid scams and what to look out for in terms of scams, because unfortunately, many folks utilize Facebook and Craigslist and utilize those for scamming people out of money. And I hear from a lot of students, I hear from a lot of parents that they kind of clue me into what's going on, which I appreciate. So just to be wary of that. So we go through that. We talk about tenant rights and responsibilities, how to be a good neighbor, and we also go through how to become a more competitive applicant in an already very competitive market. And so I know this might be a little bit small for you, but we do have it on our Instagram. We will advertise all of our workshops on the Instagram. We have these flyers posted around campus, and they're also shared out with our campus partners. So the next one is actually going to be on February 7th at 6 on Zoom, and that'll be for your student to register for, and they can get that from our website. And then the second workshop that we offer, I just kind of briefly alluded to, was the roommate relations workshop. And so this is a great opportunity for your student to get to know themselves and what's valuable to them, what's important to them in a roommate, and being able to have that opportunity to also meet other potential roommates, especially at this time in the year when everybody is searching. And so it's a really great way for people to connect with each other, reflect on their own personal needs and wants, and learn about budgeting, learn about our roommate agreement that we have available, learn about how to conduct like a roommate interview and feel confident in that new roommate situation that they're going into. And even if they know who it is that they're going to live with, I would encourage them to attend this because it gives them that opportunity to kind of explore a little bit more options. And then the last workshop that we offer is our Tenant Rights 101, Your Path to Informed Renting. And this is really important. So after you're thinking about, or after you've signed a lease, or maybe you're already off campus, your student is already off campus, we go through what are your basic tenant rights, regardless of what is stated in the lease agreement, talking about your security deposit limits, talking about right to itemized receipts. We talk about your landlord's ability to enter, discrimination, all of those things that are really important for your student to know. And so I would encourage them to also attend these workshops that we provide. And those will kick off in February on the 12th. And then I forgot to mention for the roommate relations, that'll actually be happening next Wednesday. So we offer a lot of different ways to educate your student. And if they can't attend those workshops, because I recognize I'm one person, I can't have workshops every hour of the day to work around class schedules. So to be able to alleviate that and know that students are still able to get the information that they need, we have the Educated Renter Certificate Program. And this is an asynchronous Canvas course. Even if your student attends a workshop, I would encourage them to still also take this course. It'll go through a lot more information. It'll go into more depth. It'll provide some external links as well, some videos to be able to watch. And then when students complete the course and do the brief exam at the end, they're given a certificate of completion. And so I'm working with local landlords and property managers to help them understand the value of the Educated Renter Certificate program, and then to be able to use that so students can be more competitive applicants while they are out there submitting their application. So your student, once they complete it, they get that certificate of completion. They include that with their application to their rentals. All right, so we are at our online resources now, which is great timing. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the presentation, and I actually want to bring you to this website directly. So if you want, I'll stay here for just a second if you want to scan the QR code, but I'll come back to it in a moment as well. And then maybe we can also get it dropped in the chat too. Okay, let's go back to website. All right. So now, as it's queuing up for you, you should be able to see our off-campus housing program website. I did fail to mention this at the beginning of the presentation, but my office is actually within the office of the Dean of Students. So potentially there might be some questions about on-campus housing, and I have a brief slide to be able to share with you about that. But that is actually a different department. So if you have questions about on-campus housing, the on-campus timeline and that sort of thing, I have a resource for you, but also the University Housing Office is the best resource, and they will be able to answer all your questions. So I did mention we have an Instagram. Encourage your students, or if you yourself would like to follow us along on Instagram, we offer tips there. We advertise our workshops there. It's a great way to just be able to stay connected. If you have any questions after this that maybe we don't get to, you can feel free to reach out to off-campus housing at calpoly.edu, and I'll be able to assist you with that and give you a response, and also share with your students too. So even though we really focus on the transition from on-campus to off-campus, once your student is off-campus, we still provide that support to you. Kanani, I saw you pop up. Are we doing okay?
Oh, we're doing great, Sarah. I'm just showing the group my face.
Oh,
That's
perfect. Okay, thank you. So as I was saying, that once your student moves off campus, the support from the off-campus housing program does not stop. If you need assistance, if you're having roommate issues, if you're having landlord issues, if you just have questions and you're not sure where to go, please always have your student reach out, and I'm happy to help with that. So the upcoming parent and supporter presentation. So this is where everybody is right now. So again, welcome, glad you're here. I do advertise all of our student presentations on the website as well. So we have had a few already this quarter in person. We do tend to offer quite a bit online in the evening, because that's when we tend to see the most students who are able to hop on from the comfort of their own room or home or wherever they may be. So just trying to make that a little bit more easily accessible for folks. So you can see all the workshops that I already mentioned earlier are going to be listed here. For your student to access the Educated Renter Certificate program, they can click here and just enroll with their Cal Poly credentials. As well as we have a lot of different tips. And so I've touched on many of these throughout the presentation, so you can see a little bit more details about those, as well as this will link you out to some of the worksheets and handouts that I mentioned. So your budgeting, finding compatible roommates. I do have a short video that talks about that a little bit, as well as the roommate agreement that I mentioned, which is a really great place to start for folks to be able to set those expectations. And then knowing your rights and responsibilities as a tenant. So much of that can also be found in the Educated Renter Certificate program. We'll do those specific workshops, but we also have a few guides that connect to the state of California specifically to be able to give you more in depth for that. And the importance of knowing your neighbor. So as I mentioned, their community changes when they move off campus, and that might be new for a lot of folks. So your student may be moving off campus and they want to have a group of friends over. Maybe it's going to be a bonfire in their backyard, or it's just going to be watching a football game, or it's just going to be hanging out and chatting. any size of group can actually be registered as a party. And it's great to have your students actually register their gatherings as a party with the city of SLO, because if that noise gets a little bit too loud, you know, they're kind of caught up in the fun of everything, and they don't realize that the voices are raising and people are laughing, and that laughter is traveling over and maybe waking the baby that's next door, or waking the elderly folks that are next door. If the neighbors call and do a noise complaint, your student would actually get a 20-minute courtesy phone call if they have registered their party. And that is great because that gives them a chance to quiet it down, maybe close the windows, close the doors, bring people inside, and then they avoid any sort of citation with the city for that noise violation. So I just encourage folks to always register. It's only going to help you in that situation. I have some more resources here. So if any of your students are transfer students, there is an older video recorded on here. You're getting more information today, so you can feel free to revisit that, but you'll also have this recorded. And then what I think most folks are looking for is the start your search here. So this button is going to bring us out into the next piece of the website. And so we have a lot of different search resources that are available to you and your students. Just need to move this bar out of the way. So first, we have our new off-campus housing marketplace. So this will hyperlink out. And the off-campus housing marketplace is really great. This is kind of trying to be a one-stop shop for students. So being able to find available rentals, being able to search for subleases or post your own sublease. So if your student signs a lease for a full year, but they're actually going to study abroad for winter quarter or fall quarter or whatever it may be, your student can post their apartment or their room as a sublease on our off-campus housing marketplace. And what's great about this too is this is all strictly for Cal Poly students. So when we think about Craigslist and we think about Facebook and the possibility of scams or not knowing exactly who you're connecting with, this is only for Cal Poly students. You, as a Cal Poly student, they will sign in with their Cal Poly credentials. It's all connected to single sign-on. And so you have that sense of security there. Up here, you have the ability to do a roommate search. So your student can create a profile, put in budget, interests, that sort of thing, what they're looking for in terms of leasing dates, and then get matched with potential roommates. And so it's a great way if they maybe had a roommate group fall through. I know that's happened before where a student had their roommates, actually all their other roommates had applied to be an RA, and all their other roommates had got the RA position. And this one student who didn't want to be an RA, didn't apply, had to find a whole new roommate group. And so being able to utilize the off-campus housing marketplace is just a great way to be able to connect with other students if they might be struggling to find that new roommate group, or they might need one more person. Maybe they found a great 3-bedroom, but there's only 2 of them that are able to live together that they know for sure. And so they need to find that 3rd person. And then you can search. So when we hit the search button down here, or you can hit off-campus housing at the top, we're able to search by many different filters. I like to kind of start with closest to furthest from campus. And so you'll be able to see what is available. You can click in, and I'll click in just a second, but you can click into these and see some of the pictures and some of the details, but also you have this map that you have available to you. And the map is able to give you kind of a little bit more perspective in terms of distance to campus, because I know that that is really important for folks. So if we go into, let's say this one, at the SLO, and so you can see some of the pictures, you can see contact information, your student can express their interest, and that will go directly to them. And so there's lots of different pieces that also connect. You'll see some reviews for those properties, as well as if you are interested in living there, but you don't have a roommate group, or you want to add more to your roommate group, you can join in searching for other roommates for that particular property. And some of this, it might be a little bit more have different permissions. So I'm not exactly sure if some of that will come over in the exact same way or slightly different. But that is a great resource. So I do encourage you to please utilize that with your student. They are going to be the ones with access though. So they'll have to do the logging in for the off-campus housing marketplace. And again, that hyperlink is just right here. And then additionally, because the off-campus housing marketplace is new and the more students use it, the more landlords and property managers are going to use it. But I will be honest, it is not fully comprehensive at this point. It only launched in the fall quarter, and we're right now in the thick of the rental market. So the other resource we have is this little house icon will bring us to this document, and that is a list of local apartment complexes and property managers. And so this is also a really great place to start and kind of combing through and seeing location, visiting those property managers' websites directly to be able to find out their availability, especially if you're not seeing anything that's really fitting what you want on the marketplace. We also have phone numbers connected here as well. And then just some suggested additional search resources, but always being wary of scams on kind of any of these other additional pieces. Okay, and then I do have a map of some of the complexes here, slow transit as well. So if your student is going to be needing to take the bus or wants to take the bus, that's going to have that option for you. And then a lot of the handouts that I mentioned throughout the presentation. So that budgeting worksheet, they're all kind of just put here as an easy one-stop shop. Roommate agreement, what to look for when touring a rental, what to ask. And then if your student's rental does not provide a unit rental unit condition checklist, then I have a template available to you. And that's just a great way to make sure that, you know, if there's scuffs on the wall or holes or damage from the previous tenant, you're documenting that so your student's security deposit isn't getting docked for that. And then lastly, to highlight on the website is going back to the main page, back at the bottom, the resources for living in the community. There's a lot listed here. I want to just take a moment to highlight these three that are at the bottom. SLO code enforcement, housing code enforcement is free to you and your student. Many parents have used that if mold happens to be an issue. Again, thinking about these historical homes, maybe the ventilation isn't as great. So knowing that you have access to contact code enforcement to be able to come in, do a free inspection, and be able to make sure that the changes and updates or whatever is needed for that property. Also, SLO Solutions. So SLO Solutions is free mediation services, and you can use those your student can use those mediation services for their peers if they're having roommate conflict, or also if there is something going on between your student and the landlord. These mediation services are also available for that as well. And then lastly, SLO Legal Assistance Foundation. So I hope this isn't where anybody has to go, but in case you find yourself in need of legal assistance, potentially if you're not getting the full security deposit back or anything like that, SLO Legal Assistance Foundation is a great resource and is also free to you. So that is our website. I encourage you to take more time to go through that. I'm going to reshare back to the presentation, and then I think we'll wrap up and have some time for questions. Just sharing these key takeaways for our last two slides is understanding the SLO rental market. So starting your search early, rent and amenities are going to vary, know your budget and have that cosigner ready. So that way your application can be done in complete fullness. And then communicating effectively. So outreaching and following up, encourage your student to make those phone calls, to contact, to go to those showings, and communicate once they're in their rental units, communicating when maintenance issues arise. And all of that is going to help and contribute to positive rental history for your student. And then really lastly is in empowering your student to take the lead so that they're educating themselves. They're doing the educator renter certificate, they're attending the workshops, and doing that outreach and follow up and asking questions, whether it's to me or to their landlord or their property manager. And then just again hitting, because I talked about this while we were on the website, is that the university housing timeline is totally different from my role in my office. So if you do have questions, I encourage you to connect directly with university housing. And I think, thinking of time, we can go ahead and stop there and open it up to questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah. I like to host these webinars because I'm always impressed with the number of resources available to our students. And another reason is I actually learn a lot from the questions that people ask and that are answered from parents and supporters. So we do have some questions in the QA box from attendees. The first one I see here is, okay, so what happens, maybe you've run into this before, Sarah, but what happens if a student doesn't find off-campus housing, but does have on-campus housing?
Oh, that's great. So if you have on-campus housing for next year, let's say, it's not it's not required that you move off campus if you're able to secure one of the spots that are on campus. So that's actually a really great spot to be in, because you can feel secure and know that you've got that place to land for the next year, and you can push off maybe even for a whole nother year before moving off campus. That's where I go back to just this slide with the timeline for university housing, and just making sure that you are staying on top of submitting your application for on-campus housing. If your student does not get in that lottery, so they're not required to live on campus, because there are some majors that are required, but if they're not required, they're submitting their application to go into a lottery, essentially. And so as long as they get the lottery, they get chosen, then they've secured housing, then they don't need to continue searching for off-campus housing if they don't want to. They could, if they're really trying to move off campus and not be on campus, but you will have to connect with university housing about what needs to happen if you're going to break that contract after getting accepted to on-campus housing. So I would encourage you to talk with them about that. But a lot of students, what happens is they don't get the lottery, and that's what this timeline is really mentioning. So when you don't get the lottery, you're not guaranteed for on-campus housing, but you can put your name on an interest list, and they do run that interest list throughout summer. So there's still a slight possibility that you might get on-campus housing, but it's also very competitive. So even if your student really, really wants to be on campus, and they don't get the lottery, it's very important that they have a backup plan for off-campus, because it is not guaranteed that they will get on-campus housing for that next year with just being on the interest list. The only guarantee is if you're a required major or required program, or if you are successful in getting in on the lottery.
No, thanks for that, Sarah. And I'm wondering too, have you ever seen if students get in a bind, right? They don't have on-campus housing and they haven't been able to secure off-campus housing. Have you ever run into that situation? And what are some of the things that we can do for students in that situation?
Yeah, so that does happen, but I feel like fairly rarely, which is good. If they're either able to get the on-campus through the lottery or through the interest list, it just might not happen until September, like the first week of school, which is stressful for sure. But we do have our Cal Poly Cares application, so that can provide some assistance to be able to find potentially emergency housing on campus if you're really in a bind, or potentially additional funds if you're able to find a place but you don't have the amount of money needed for the first month's rent plus security deposit all at once. So there are those options available. With the marketplace and having a little bit more easy access to like subleases and stuff, that is where I see a lot of students who kind of aren't able to secure exactly what they want in an off-campus housing situation, but they are able to secure a sublease at least for a quarter at a time, which again isn't ideal because you have to up and move each quarter. But that's why it's so important to start this process early, so that way you're able to find something and get settled and know that you have that place to land for the next academic year. And always just having folks reach out to me too, because I'll have a lot of times especially throughout the summer, I'll have a lot of folks reach out saying, my student is still trying to find another roommate and they can't find somebody else to fill in. And so I can help facilitate some of those connections too.
Very good. Sarah, do you want to stop sharing?
Oh, yes, sorry.
You're good. You're good. Great, thanks. Yeah, I was thinking about that too when you were talking about the timing, and there's a lot of parents and supporters here who have questions about that timing. You know, the lottery, not knowing, like what does that window look like, Sarah? Can you revisit that from the presentation? I know you talked about it.
Yeah, so those details I don't actually have off the top of my head because the timeline for on-campus housing goes through university housing. But I believe those applications are going to start opening up, I want to say sometime within the next month or so. But it takes a while, into probably like March, April, roughly, to be able to know if they've secured the on-campus housing. And so that is a huge mismatch when we're thinking about where we're at in the rental cycle for off-campus housing, which is right now. So we're going to see most of the leases actually getting signed in winter quarter, January, February, March. And so that's why it's really important for students to be searching for their off-campus housing and have that backup plan. If they are really interested in just having on-campus housing, that's great. And it's very competitive. So still understanding, you know, what are your important pieces about location, amenities, budget, looking through the resources so you at least know what are some potential places that we could look into that meet our criteria if on-campus housing falls through. And so it would mean that if you're waiting, that you're waiting until much later in our local rental cycle. So it might mean that you're not starting that until late March, early April, when many of the cheaper apartment complexes are already going to have their leases fully signed. So you may have to consider readjusting what your main criteria are, potentially considering moving a little bit further away from campus, factoring in more of that commute time. We do have a lot of students that also live in our surrounding areas. So they go down to the 5 cities, with Aurora Grande, Oceano, Grover Beach, those areas, and then up north into Atascadero, Paso as well. So we do have students that live there. It just does offer a lot more time intensity in terms of the commute. And it's not much depending on where you come from. So it's, you know, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes with traffic, depending on where it is that you're coming from. But for some, they want to be able to walk to campus within 10 minutes. So a 10-minute walk versus a 30-minute drive is very different depending on what your needs are and what you want.
Great, thanks. There's some people here who are wondering about co-signers. Maybe they've run into a couple rental places that don't allow co-signers. Have you run into that before and sort of helped students through that process?
I haven't. So the program started about a year ago, and I've been with it for this last year. And so most places that I've worked with students on is they have required co-signers. I haven't seen too many that go the opposite direction. I think of the ones I've maybe heard of, their rent is significantly more. So most of the students that I work with are not looking at rent that's high. It's just not going to be as feasible. So personally, I have not actually encountered that too much.
Okay, that's good to hear because I know that a lot of our students need to use those. When the resources are on the housing, the off-campus housing site that you showed us, and students can sort of look through houses on there, parents and supporters could look through there as well. Are those campus partners, or are we publishing things that we find out in the community?
Yeah, so we aren't, the campus is not affiliated officially with any apartment complex, any properties out in the community. But I am trying to build those relationships with our property managers, with our landlords. Again, as I mentioned before, so that they'll accept the educated renter certificate and kind of hold that as helping students be more competitive. But really, we're trying to create a resource list. So we're not endorsing any of the properties per se, but we are providing you with the knowledge that we have of the available rentals. And it's always going to be important for the tenant to do their due diligence and make sure that it is meeting what they need. Because with the way the rental market is, and me being only one person, I can't go out and do those inspections, and making sure that it's going to be the perfect fit for X, Y, or Z student. So while we don't endorse them, we do encourage students to review that as a pretty comprehensive list, so they can be as informed as possible about what their options are.
Great, that is super helpful. Just one last question I have for you here, Sarah. The ERCP course, how long does that take?
Oh, good question. So it's actually self-paced. So I think when students kind of sit through it in just one go, it's about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how fast they go through the content. But it's also self-paced. So if your student wants to do a portion of it, and then they decide, I want to watch a show, or they have to study for their exam, or kind of pop back in and out, it's totally fine to be able to do that. They can do that at their own pace, but roughly about 30 to 45 minutes if they're just sitting and going through the whole course.
Okay, and if I'm a parent and supporter with a student, am I able to see what's in that course as well?
Yes, you could technically, if you sign up for the Learning Commons, I think that's the right word. There's another link to it right there on the website as well. So you could technically get into that course as well, but your student would be the one that has to complete the course and do the exam at the end to get the certificate.
Okay, great. And Sarah, is this course a part of PATHs?
Not
PATHs?
currently, but the goal is that we will eventually have an off-campus housing path, but it is not currently a part of paths.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much, Sarah. We're gonna wrap up here, folks. I just want to thank our presenter, Sarah Bacio, for taking the time to present for parents and supporters today. The off-campus housing contact information, it's already been posted here in the chat. I also want to thank you, parents and supporters, for joining us today. The Lunch and Learn webinar series was created by the Parent Advisory Council. Markham and Susan are here. And it's a great way to stay connected to campus and receive up-to-date information directly from campus experts like Sarah. So all of that contact information should be right here in the chat for you. Please contact us. We are going to gather the questions that were asked today. Make sure that Sarah has those for frequently asked questions. And we can also publish answers for that, or we'll contact us, our campus partners, to answer the questions that maybe we didn't get to today. So have a great day, folks. Thanks to our panel. Thanks to you, and take care, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.